recently I changed the body composition goals in Samsung Health. So I do have my data from the Garmin Index S2 body composition scale imported or synchronized via an Android app called Health Sync to Samsung Health, which means I can also use Samsung Health still with basically the Garmin Index S2. Now, I have been quite thinking a little bit about what does it make sense? So what goals do make sense? So in Samsung Health you do have these two different things. The first one is that you have the weight target, and so not these two different, but you have these three different goals you potentially can put in. The first one would be the weight target. The second one would be skeletal muscle target. And the third one would be body fat target. The question now is how or which combination of these should you put in, and then also which values. So previously I tinkered around with having skeletal muscle mass as a target in here. Now the problem, I think, to a certain extent is that skeletal muscle mass is only kind of an extrapolation based on the body fat measurement. So it seems to be the case, at least Peter Attia explained it also with the DEXA scan. Of course, now the bioimpedance scale I have at home is not a DEXA scan, but what he explained is that mostly these devices measure fat and the rest of your mass. So these are basically the two categories, fat and other. I think that's kind of almost a direct quote. He said something like, it measures fat and other. Now, based on the rest and based on average skeletal muscle mass at a given height, at a given ethnicity, you then could potentially get a muscle mass. And also a skeletal muscle mass, a subset of the total muscle mass, which would also include the smooth muscle. Now, if I input now all of these three values, the problem is that I don't have a variable that basically is left. And so I might basically make a miscalculation, which would be, let's say I put in 80 kilograms in terms of the weight target and a body fat percentage of, or a skeletal muscle mass of 50 kilograms and a body fat target of 5. Is this even possible? I don't know. I don't think so even. I haven't calculated this, but there seems to be no error message that is message that is then calculated. So if I then input less, I think I would leave out the skeletal muscle mass target, as also the skeletal muscle mass as measured on different devices is quite different. So if I take a look at the in-body measurement at my gym, then my muscle mass is usually at 38, 39, at 40 kilograms. And if I take a look at my accent when speaking, then sometimes I have the UK mass, and sometimes I use the US mass. Now, back to the topic. If I now have a weight target and a body fat target, then I think this would be sufficient to then result in something that is basically not something that would put out an error message actually. So it does not put out an error message, but it just seems that it does not make sense to constrain all of these three. Now, also because the difficulty of actually getting an estimate of skeletal muscle mass, and also because it goes up and down with the body composition measurement on the Galaxy Watch if you would measure it on there, but this seems to be going up and down anyway. So what I'm using is the Garmin Index S2, and I also stopped measuring my body fat composition or my body composition on the Galaxy Watch 4, because then I would additionally have values in there, and you cannot separate them out by category of, okay, these values are from the Galaxy Watch and these values are from somewhere else. And so I think it makes the most sense to have just a body fat target. Why? Or at least for me, I think it makes the most sense. If I increase muscle mass, which is still kind of my goal, then I have at a given rest lean, or at a given rest mass of my body, I then have a lower body fat. But also, if I still basically have the same otherwise body, but I decrease my body fat, then I also get a lower body fat. So basically, both things I could do in order to optimize my body fat, and body fat seems to be mostly useful as a minimizing function, and the minimizing function is only useful up to a certain point, up until the point where you then are in the range of essential fat, but your body is probably, or mine at least, is probably preventing me from going too low in body fat anyway. So it might be quite difficult to reach something of a body fat of 1%. And so, therefore, it seems to be quite useful to simplify it as follows, at least for me. I just have a body fat target, which means if I increase muscle mass, then I can reach this body fat target easier. If I decrease fat mass, then I can also reach this body fat target easier. So both things are good things So both things that result out of having a body fat target seem to be good things. So I just set it as to 5 because 5 is a useful number, and I also often use these heuristics. Maybe it makes more sense to, first of all, try to get the 10, and not only get the 10, but the 10 as a yearly average. But so much about the different targets one can set in Samsung Health.